I would like to draw your attention to them. They are with us, sitting to my left along the wall. They put, good questions to us. And that is what we were doing. We were trying to answer their good questions. So I apologize to not only to colleagues, but to all witnesses for the delay. And now, colleagues, we shall begin our agenda for the day. Le Comité permanent des affaires juridiques.
The Standing Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs is resuming its study of Bill S10, an act to amend the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act and to make related and consequential amendments to other acts. This afternoon we will have 4 different panels. It is our pleasure to begin with our first panel.
We'll hear from, in this room, from the Association des directeurs de police du Québec, Monsieur Yves Morency.
L'Association des directeurs de police du Québec, Yves Morency, President, and the Montreal Police Service, Jean-Guy Gagnon, Assistant Director. Welcome, gentlemen, and we would like to thank you for taking the trouble to come here.
Vancouver, I believe it is, we have Mr. David Bratzer, who is an executive board member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. So this is a panel where we're hearing from law enforcement officers, not all of whom may be in total agreement with each other, but we will be grateful for all perspectives. Monsieur Morency, Monsieur Gagnon, est-ce que vous avez décidé en...
Mr. Morency, Mr. Gagnon, have you decided who of you will begin? I've been informed that it will be Mr. Morency. Go ahead. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Madam Chairman, as well as the members of the committee, for giving me this opportunity to speak to your committee as part of your study on Bill S10. Thank you for your availability and for listening to our point of view, and I hope that you will have some questions for us. At the outset, to give you some idea of what the Association of Quebec Police Directors is, it is a non-profit organization that has been in existence for approximately 80 years. Our first mission is to bring together the police directors and their partners in order to make a contribution to the improvement of the security of the Quebec citizens. Over the years, the ADPQ has played a significant role in consultations with various Quebec departments, including the Department of Public Security, the Department of Justice of Quebec, the Quebec Department of Health and Social Services, Department of Education, Leisure and Sport. The ADPQ is a member of various strategic committees at the provincial level. I should note at the outset, and I don't think you will be surprised to hear this, that we do give you our full support. We give full support to Bill S10, both in its form and the provisions that are contained in this bill. And I should also note that we consider this bill to a way of supporting the work being done by the police. I'd like to sum up our position then and to give you an idea of what our priorities are in dealing with the fight against drugs in Quebec. There is a group of strategic experts that provides advice to the Department of Public Security in Quebec and has identified the fight against drugs as the second of our 4 main priorities over the next 5 years. This means that the various police forces in Quebec are making a particular effort, have been mobilized over the past years. And we hope that at one point we'll be able to see that there is some change in the phenomenon. But as I say, this is our second priority for the province. That is dealing with this problem of narcotics. The problem is certainly not declining, at least according to our statistics. I'd also like to note the work being done by the police in school environments. As you know, consumption and traffic, it does affect school children. A number of recent articles appeared in the press relating to dropout rates. And it is clear that part of this phenomenon is due to drug trafficking and the use of drugs the dropout rate is affected by this. I noted in a report on criminality that on the ground there has been an increase, that at least 30% of young people attending a high school do consume cannabis and in some cases other drugs as well as chemical products. This bill will certainly, in our view, slow down the interest shown by some people in being recruited by networks of drug dealers. We describe these people as the gardeners, or the ones who look after the grow-ups or plantations. They are not necessarily criminals. They are people who are recruited because they may have gambling problems, money problems. They are vulnerable, and very often they are contacted. They are given this as a way of making easy money, and if the legal consequences are minor for them, then, of course, the temptation is all the greater. And if the consequences were more serious, the likely consequences, then we are convinced that probably a large number of these people might give up on the idea. This will make the work of the drug dealers a bit more difficult. We believe that a balanced strengthening of the sentences will send out a clear message. At the present time, we're putting a great deal of effort into repression, but the final result is that people face fairly minor consequences for their acts, and there is a temptation to go back to such habits. We often find ourselves arresting the same people who continue to be active in these networks. So I think that this bill is certainly a step in the right direction to achieve a better balance, what we are doing with respect to repression and the consequences of such acts as well. I also wanted to say something about these are certain figures that will give you an idea of the extent of the problem. I do have figures here that come from the drug analysis report for the Montreal metropolitan area, and I'm not going to be repeating information that you've already been given. This is an analysis of the various seizures that have been made throughout the Montreal area. And in 2009, there were 14,423 files relating to cannabis, 4,600 files in the case of cocaine. And what is particularly remarkable in the third position, and this is progressing, these are all the drugs related to methamphetamines. 4,368 files then relating to methamphetamines. And this chemical drug is starting to do a great deal of damage, particularly in schools. And I think that there are provisions in Schedule 1 of the Act relating to this, and we consider this to be a step in the right direction as well. Because we've been noting that in the case of young people, they tend to migrate towards this particular type of drug, speed and ecstasy, because they are drugs that are readily available at low prices. $3, for example, is enough to buy this drug, whereas at one time it cost as much as $25. There are clandestine labs that are being installed throughout the municipalities in residential neighborhoods, and they've even set up mobile labs. They can set up shop then and supply their clients. This gives an idea then of the importance of tightening the legislation. We've also noticed that young people make use of cocktails, that is, mixing various types of drugs, thinking, for example, of speed, cocaine, marijuana, that have all their particular properties. Speed, for example, to stay awake, cocaine when they're looking for more pleasure, and then something else when they want to slow down. We find these mixes are being used increasingly. There's a very large market. There's a large quantity flooding the markets. There are a large number of new consumers. I talked about at least a 30% increase in respect to consumption in the schools. And we now see that there are these various cocktails. We can consider what the long-term health effects will be for these people, and also the effects in driving cars. For example, these are people who drive cars. They are subject to the rule zero alcohol. The problem at the present time is not so much impaired driving because of alcohol, but because of drug consumption. There's one point I'd like to conclude on, and it's an important one. I talked about the targets that we've set. The fight against drugs is our second most important target. I'd like to talk about the federal fund that was set up to deal with criminality and to increase the number of policemen dealing with various problems. In Quebec, we received part of this federal funding for a 5-year period, and we are making use of it in our police operations, our frontline operations. And when I talked about this second priority, this money is being used to create what we describe as mixed squadrons. This is very efficient because policemen do not work in isolation. They work together, they share their information, and they carry out their investigations together. So this is a more efficient way of dealing with this particular issue. Recently, for example, a request was submitted for new regional mixed squads that would deal more particularly with drug issues. I would not like to mention the place where this is located so as not to profile the region, but it will be located in a given region that accounts, I would say, that represents a territory of 1.5 times the size of Montreal. And there were over 300 grow-ups in this area. So once again, it is not a phenomenon that is declining. We could not be against this bill. Quite the contrary, I think that this is a step in the right direction. It's probably a first step. I imagine that other measures will have to be taken at a later date. But at the very least, this particular bill, I think, is in keeping with the need to strengthen a message and to send out a positive message to the police forces who are dealing with these problems. Thank you. Mr. Gagnon, I'm honored to be here. Good afternoon. This is my first experience in appearing as a witness before a Senate committee, and won't be the last, I hope. There are two particular items I'd like to deal with. First of all, as the Vice Chair of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, I am the Vice Chair of an association that has been in existence for over 100 years now and brings together most of the police organizations active in Canada. The main police organizations, whether it be the RCMP, the OPP, the Quebec Police Force, the Metropolitan Police in the various cities. We have 18 standing committees within our group dealing with various issues relating to police services. And among these committees, there are 3 that have been working on the problem of interest to here today, the Drug Abuse Committee. It's a committee that has been working on specific activities involving repression and prevention. This committee guides the Canadian Police Chiefs Association. There's also the Organized Crime Committee that works more specifically on the relations between the drugs and criminal organizations that make such substances available. And lastly, there's a committee that deals with legislative aspects to provide advice to the association on legislative measures that may be adopted by governments in an attempt to assist the police in their work in combating activities relating to drugs.